My name is Councillor Reg Barry. I'm chairing this meeting today. Other members of the committee present are Councillors Adrian Axford, Councillor John Hobart, Councillor John Kilpatrick, Councillor Michael Lilly and Councillor Chris Quirk. A number of officers and external representatives are also in attendance. Housekeeping. I think we're all aware of the housekeeping, so unless anybody's got any questions on it, we'll miss that. I think everybody's aware of what we've got to do in the case of fire, etc., etc. Item 1, to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of March. We haven't had any issues raised. Is there any objections to the minutes from the members?
No.
Proposed acceptance.
Thank you very much.
I'll second that.
Are there any declarations of interest? No. Public question time. We've had no public questions, so we'll move on to agenda item 4, approval of the final accounts. There's a revised timetable of the final accounts. There's the external audit, letter of representation, and the letter of representation for the Isle of Wight Pension Fund, audit results 1920, audit results for the pension fund. These are now being scheduled for the meeting on the 30th of November. They've slipped. So is everybody happy with that?
Content.
Thank you. Item 5, to receive an update from the external auditors on the progress with the audits of the Isle of Wight Council and the Isle of Wight Pension Fund. External auditors David White, Ellen Thompson and Jack Dunkley are in attendance. Unless any members, right, can we have the presentation, please?
Good morning, Chairman. In actual fact, you've got myself and David.
That's fine.
So we thought it would be helpful in light of your previous agenda item just to give members an update on where we are with the audits for the Council and the Pension Fund, bearing in mind that the timetable has slipped. So I don't want to go through in detail the paper that is in front of you, but I thought it would be helpful particularly to focus on the where we are with the objections which are mentioned on page 13 of the report pack. So for this current year, we have received objections from 2 different individuals which form multiple parts. And the first stage of that is to determine whether or not we will accept the objection as something as valid and take forward. The subject of the objections is something that has previously been considered through an objection process. So this is a little bit more complicated than normal. And we need to make an assessment as to whether it is something that we accept in full or in part, and we also need to consider what impact it may or may not have on the Council's financial statements. So that remains in progress. Dependent on where we reach with the impact on the financial statements is largely going to drive whether or not we can issue the audit opinion for both the Council and the Pension Fund by the end of November. Our intention at this stage is to ensure that we complete all of the work on the Council and Pension Fund, that we are in as good a position as possible subject to our decision around the objections. And that remains that's kind of the remainder of the paper where we give you an update on that. If members would like, David can give an update on the progress on the actual council audit, and I have a brief update if anybody wants the detail on where we are with the pension fund. David, is there anything you'd like to add in terms of that I may have forgotten in terms of an introduction before we take any questions or comments?
No, I don't think so, Helen.
The Chairman, happy to take any questions or comments on the paper.
Adrian.
Morning. From the point of view of the pension fund accounts, I'm not quite sure whether they're directly affected by this challenge. Can you not sign off the pension fund accounts separately?
So sadly, Councillor Axford, I thought we could, but it turns out that because the pension fund accounts are published alongside the council opinion and is addressed to the council, then it gets held up as well. We are very much hoping that we will be in a position to conclude this as quickly as possible. But so it's not, it doesn't, the objections do not directly impact the pension fund, it's just the logistics.
Thank you.
Tell me, Liz, if this extra work, to look at this again, look at these complaints, there'll be an extra cost. Will there? Will the council have to pay extra for you to do this work?
Sadly, yes, Councillor Barry, that is the case, that if that the work that we need to do on this will then become a cost to the council. That is why we are taking the time now to assess whether or not we accept it in full or in part, or indeed that we need to accept it at all. And it is important that we go through that process, both from the point of view of the rights of the individual making the objection, but also to try and protect the council to an extent in terms of the additional costs that ensue.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Just one. In the Wight report on page 14, it says review of the council's going concern assessment. I assume that the going concern assessment that the council made was that we are a going concern.
Yes, indeed. Your assessment is that you are a going concern, and largely for the public sector, we would expect councils to assess themselves as going concern. I think if you have significant exposure, as some councils do, to unusual commercial activities, shall we say, so for example, if you were to own an airport, then I think the going concern assessment becomes more challenging. However, we would still expect to see enhanced disclosures in this particular year, given the impact of COVID-19 on the council's finances, both in the short term and the medium term. And I know that that is something that the council is working on.
Councillor Lilly. Michael, you wanted to speak? You're muted, I think. No. Yeah, I can hear you now.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Sorry, my screen went a bit strange. I wanted to ask, you just commented about if there were sort of unusual things like airports, right? And this triggered me to think that are there other things that, for instance, we put loans into, right, which could be endangered, right, due to the various sort of changes, you know, particularly with COVID within the financial year, and do you need to look at a particular thing? I particularly raise it because this afternoon at corporate scrutiny we are calling in the decision regarding the loan of PTEC, which is a tidal energy project. And I was going to raise this in members' questions anyway, but it seemed to be relevant that, you know, should the auditors be looking at ventures that we have investment in that could be in danger, as you say, you know, in your reference to things like airports.
Michael, is this the same question you're going to ask in members' question time? Because I think.
Well, I felt that it was relevant that
well, if you ask in
relation to
members' question time, do you?
Sorry.
You'll only get one question, won't you?
Okay. I just thought it was. I would like to know whether the auditors would be looking. I will bring my question fully at question time, Chair, but I do wish to know in a more generic way whether the auditors would be look at things that we have investment in that could not be going concerns,
So,
like airports.
so in terms of just responding to that element of the question, would we take into account both investments in or loans, looking at it from the other side, maybe also loans that the council have, that would all form part of our review of the council's going concern assessment. So the council has, I might ask David to step in a moment because he's a little bit closer to the detail, but the council has already provided us with their assessment of how they have decided that they are a going concern, and effectively our work is to use a phrase, kick the tires on that. But David can perhaps explain a little bit better about what we're looking at, because he will have looked at this already to an extent.
Yeah, so as Helen says, it does all come into our consideration of sort of the council's overall position. As far as PTEC is concerned, our understanding of that one is that it's held as a long-term debtor in the council's balance sheet. It doesn't give rise to group accounts because of the materiality consideration against the overall value of the council's accounts and how much is invested in PTEC. And I think as far as the council's going concern assessment's concerned, it would be a more significant issue if the investment was of a greater magnitude and it gave rise to group accounts in the council's accounts, but the PTEC arrangement doesn't. And what we've done in prior years is to look at that and the council's assessment of the collectability of that debt, and that is the approach that we would continue to take with regards to that one going forward, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Can we consider the update noted? Yes.
Yes.
Item 6, the report of the Chief Internal Auditor. That's Lizzie Goodwin.
Chair, I was waiting for technology to catch me up.
Oh, that's okay.
Thank you very much. Morning all. So on a regular basis, we present to you movement in relation to our audit plan, and the last meeting that we had, I actually brought forward a revised audit plan. It is very important, obviously, this year that we keep it as revised as possible, as flexible as possible, because there are a number of additional sign-offs, i.e. around the grants that are needed. In relation to, since the previous reporting time, and this is the first time really that we're presenting work that we've undertaken in relation to this year's plan, we have no new areas of significant concern to bring to your attention. We are proposing undertaking 62 reviews, and detailed on page 25 onwards is the individual results of work that we have undertaken. At the moment, there are a number of grant verifications that have been coming through, which in all honesty, they either pass or they fail, and those are detailed on the earlier pages. And then we have a number of follow-up reviews which we have performed. We are doing a two-stage follow-up for this year, and we may consider actually doing that moving forward as well for future years, where if the exception is still open and remains in progress, we will keep an active review until that is actually closed. So in a nutshell, Chair, we have no new areas of concern to bring to your attention. The plan is progressing. We will keep it flexible, and I am happy to answer any questions you may have. Apologies for my teeth not working.
Thank you, Lizzie. Has anyone got any questions for Lizzie? No? Well, thank you, Lizzie. Oh, wait, we've continued. Chris. Chris? You must be mute, Chris. Go on, unmute. Unmute.
Yeah, I think I'm unmuted now, yeah?
That's it, brilliant.
On page 39, insufficient staffing capacity and skills. We've gone from amber to green, which is very encouraging. Is this being affected by COVID though?
Sorry, Chair, page
39. In March we were green, and in
Chris, I think
September
you're
we're amber.
talking
Is
about
this
the risk.
affected by COVID?
That's the risk assessment, Chris.
Oh, sorry, have I jumped a bit?
I think
You
you
have.
have.
Oh, sorry, apologies.
That's okay. No, that's
Yeah, apologies, I turned too many pages. Right, I'll wait for that.
Michael.
Yes, thank you, Elizabeth. That there were no further concerns, right? But are there still things that you have been concerned about previously that you are still? So I was interested in the ones that you were still concerned about, because you actually said you had no new concerns, right? So what are the ones that currently you're concerned about?
Right, Councillor Lilly, we report to you audits that we've undertaken during any particular period, and I would always raise with you if there are high risks and if there is any audit where there is a no assurance overall for the entire system. When I refer to the statement that there are no new concerns, it means during this reporting period, I am not highlighting to you high risk areas or no assurances. In relation to your second part of the question, which is what are my general concerns? Any area, and I wouldn't have specific areas, but any area where we have a high risk historically on the table and we have seen inadequate movement is what I would consider to be a concern. I do not have those in front of me, but they are contained within each of the reports that we will bring to you at any given time. So I will bring back to you any new high risks and any areas where there has been lack of movement. So in relation to this particular report, you will see in the earlier pages where we do a follow-up. And if we can see that there is movement, so on page 26, for example, we can see we have one medium risk area that is in progress, one's been closed. So unless I bring your specific attention to anything in this report, at the moment, controls are being implemented to mitigate relevant risk exposure. So I'm not bringing any specific area to your attention.
Is everybody happy?
Okay. In that regard, you had been looking at the concerns of beach huts, right? For instance, have you got any update on those? Because those were seen as a sort of medium risk, right? Regarding the projections, right?
Yes, Councillor Lilly, this is the update. So when we performed our follow-up review, we were able to close one of the exceptions. The other medium risk exception is in progress, and the revised action date would be September. Whilst we are at the tail end of September, we have to pull our data and information at the beginning because it goes through all of the relevant checks and balances internally before reports get published. So moving on to water safety, we performed a follow-up review. The first medium risk is in progress. The low risk is pending. You've also got a third low risk, which was closed when we did this piece of work, and the remaining one, obviously, which is a medium risk, again is in progress. Independent fostering, however, when we reviewed to see whether they were implementing their agreed actions, we were able to close off all of those exceptions. Turning over the page, 28, the exceptions for special education needs are also closed. So it's just to update you that we had high risks open when we originally looked at this. We've come back, we've had a look, and we've been able to ascertain that they have implemented and mitigated the risk exposure to an acceptable level. Income management, and this was predominantly around the floating bridge. Again, the high risk and the medium risk have been closed. Moving on to Nicholson Road, all of the issues that were open have been reviewed, and we are satisfied that at that particular time we were able to close those exceptions. Audit work is always a position in time, and we always look at a sample, and what we would be saying to you is at that given time, for the population or the sample size that we looked at, we were satisfied that there wasn't risk exposure. Does that help at all?
No, thank you. Thank you.
If there are no members' objections, we can consider that noted. The report noted. Is everybody happy?
Noted.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lizzie.
Thank you, Chair.
Right. Six, item 7. Council's risk profile. This is the one Chris had a question.
Yes.
So,
Shall I start?
no, we want Debbie. We'll have Debbie first to take us through it, and then you'll be first on the list, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay? I had trouble with my mic earlier.
Oh, that's
Super.
lovely.
Okay, you will have seen this report quite often now, but you will have had Dave Martin sat in the seat. Dave's taken a day off today, so I've stepped in. The risk summary report basically gives you the strategic risks at their current position, but we report the last 3 quarters for your information. The most recent quarter being September 2020, so that you can see the progress and the change in the risks from March through to September. The comments on the far right of the report explain any change in relation to those scores and any mitigations that have been put in place. So those are the most up-to-date comments. In terms of taking you through the report, I don't know if you normally go through each of the risks, if that would be useful, or if I just take questions in terms of any of the ones that aren't as clear as they might be.
Is that would the members like to do it page by page, risk by risk?
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so risk number 1 is a lack of financial resource and the ability to deliver the council's in-year budget strategy for 2021. You'll note that the increased risk is red for this quarter, and that's in relation to the forecast potential budget pressure of the 8.4 million as a result of the COVID impact. And there's more detail on that further down in relation to that financial risk. Number 2 is the lack of financial resource and the ability to deliver the council's medium-term strategy. And again, there's a significant impact for the 2021 budget of the COVID-19 pandemic. The text there is actually self-explanatory, and we will see considerable pressure on the budget when you set that for the 2021-22 budget. Regular monitoring reports were undertaken and sent to the Ministry of Communities, Housing and Local Government, and both the Strategic Management Team and the Cabinet are kept informed of the overall impact of the additional expenditure due to COVID-19. Number 3, insufficient staffing skills and capacity. Again, this has moved from amber. The ongoing pandemic situation is so that we continue to see some staffing pressures, which are closely monitored. There's also a change in service specs for the likes of leisure, where we are looking to bring services back as much as we can with the staff that we currently have in place. One of the good news items, I suppose, if there are any in terms of COVID, is that the staff sickness in relation to time taken over this period has actually reduced, and long-term absences and frequent absences have all come down. Would you like to ask your question now, Councillor?
Thank you.
So,
Unmute. Chris, you're muted.
Can you hear me now? Yep,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
Back in March, we were green. This has changed to amber. Is that because of the changed roles because of COVID, or is it because we've lost staff? Because if we were green, something has happened to take us to amber. What was the something?
Okay, so no, we haven't lost staff as such. We do have some staff on furlough, which is the government's arrangements to enable us to keep those staff maintained. Those end at the end of October. The change from green to amber is more related to the projects that were going to be undertaken in order to develop staff capacity and skills, which as a result of the pandemic and those people potentially doing other roles or supporting the response phase are somewhat behind. So an example of that would be we had a recruitment project in place which was aiming at streamlining and improving the process for recruitment to increase that staff capacity where we need it in certain areas. That was delayed somewhat. That's now back as a key project for the council to make sure that those areas that do traditionally suffer from more gaps in their provision are supported to fill those gaps as they come up. One of the other things that we're finding through the ability now to work from home more flexibly and all the technologies that's brought to us has actually widened our recruitment base in terms of how we can, for areas that we have had difficulty sometimes, potentially look to different methods of recruitment for those areas. But we haven't lost any staff in that respect.
Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Lilly's got is your question specifically for that item?
I was, it was to do with the risk register, with items in the risk register.
That's a general question. Let Debbie finish.
Okay.
First.
Okay. Thank you very much. Item 4 is the change in organisational culture and failure to keep pace. As you can see, this has gone from amber to green. This is connected to the many successes really that Agile Working has had in our response to COVID. Processes are in place to enable staff who absolutely must come in to be able to come in, but the working from home is working well across the piece. The feedback that we've had on that has come from consultation events and our pulse survey, so we know that staff are in general embracing the ability to work from home in these difficult times. Item 5, the failure to improve. Sorry.
Can I ask a question on that, please, Chair?
Yeah, go on then.
You say that from your surveys that staff are actually okay with, working from home, right?
The majority.
The majority. Is there any evidence? Because in other surveys across the country, there is a view that the mental health of employees working from home and being isolated is actually having an effect on their well-being. I just wondered whether there was any particularly look at the actual mental well-being of people working from home and being isolated from other work colleagues.
Can I just come in there?
Right.
This is about the Isle of Wight, not the rest of the country.
No, I want to know the effects, raise the effects on Isle of Wight employees that are now having to completely change their work patterns and actually work remotely and not have necessarily the physical day-to-day contact of their fellow colleagues, which is always seen as the past as an important part of good working. That's completely changed. So I think we should look at that, right?
Okay, I can answer that for you, Councillor Lilly. The staff survey included questions about people's mental health, about our self-isolation, etc. And it's a key part of our HR policy advice and support to people. So all those elements have been addressed and are being picked up. Anyone that feels that they need to be in the office, that need to be supported in any sort of way around that, we have risk assessments in place and we have the advice line for staff to use. So of course, it doesn't suit everybody. So all our offices are now COVID safe, so that those people that find the situation at home more difficult are enabled to come into work with their manager's request, following a risk assessment to make sure that that is the best place for them. And those supports are in place for any staff member that's struggling, whether personally or through work, so the council is supporting them in any way possible during this very difficult time.
Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you very much, Debbie. Thank you.
No problem. Okay. Okay, failure. So number 5, failure to improve educational attainment. This has remained an amber, but you'll see that the scores have come down. We've come down from a 9 up to 11 and back down to a 10. And the reduction in the score is connected to the fact that all the Isle of Wight schools are being reopened and the new monitoring process are developed and in place. Obviously, there's uncertainty remaining regarding the future COVID outbreaks and the formats of the 2021 academic year assessments for Key Stage 2, the GCSE and A levels. So we need to keep an eye on all of that. Item 6, failure to identify and effectively manage situations where vulnerable children are subject to abuse. Again, you know, the comments are there. The service is fully operational. It continues to operate as near normal as possible. There has been a rise in caseloads for social workers, and I believe this is also being addressed through a recruitment and additional workers being brought in to address that. Item 7, failure to recruit acceptable quality of professionals across adult social care and housing. Again, this has reduced from the last quarter, so some positions have needed to be advertised more than once. The progress is now coming into place where we're able to recruit to vacancies and reduce the use of agency staff. In addition, the service is also growing their own and have 5 people now going through an apprentice social work degree, hence the amber. Item 8, failure to identify and effectively manage solutions where vulnerable adults are subject to abuse. Again, there's a lot of text there. Anyone that's watching the news or keeping an eye on what's going on can obviously understand why we're now at a red situation in relation to that one. There's a lot of preparation going on for an upcoming CQC inspections for our own provision. Work's been undertaken also with the independent care market. And it's been recognised as national best practice here on the island. Okay, number 9, failure to secure the required outcomes from an integrated adult social care and health. In August 2020, NHS England and the NHS Improvement Board published an updated discharge to assess requirement, confirming clinical commissioning groups remain financially responsible for care and support for up to 6 weeks. After that 6 weeks is the concern, and a discharge to assess manager has been put in place in order to help cope with the additional winter pressures that will be exacerbated by COVID-19. Adult social care provider failure. Isle of Wight care providers are not reporting any issues with PPE provision currently, although the financial risk remains with the additional government funding recently being announced. The Department of Health and Social Care are continually issuing guidance to local authorities on winter planning and how that and the impact of COVID can be joined up. 11A, the failure of the waste contract. Again, the text is there, it's still on red. The construction of the energy recovery plant is currently suspended following the subcontractors leaving the site on the 16th of March. I do believe, however, since this report was written, that they are now back online. And the waste and PFI risks are also undertaken separately to that contract board. The ERF is now scheduled to be complete in April 2021. All household waste collections have continued all through lockdown, and the recycling rates remain high. Diversion from landfill rate is close to 100%. 11B, failure of highways PFI. Again, in terms of the text there's nothing really to add to that. Discussions are ongoing between the service provider and the council to facilitate the completion of the core investment period contract, which is milestone 14. Oh, sorry.
Chris?
No, so you finish what you're saying. I just wanted a question on this one.
Okay, I'd finished, to be honest.
It talks about the failure of the PFI and it talks about the cutting of budgets. Is there any link between those two? Because the theory is there shouldn't be.
Okay, I can't actually comment on that, I'm afraid, but I can take your question away and bring a response back to you. The savings programme was established and agreed with Island Roads, so as you say, that shouldn't have impacted on any outcome of that PFI framework. The targets were met and agreed jointly. They weren't. There is, as it says, the savings are a balance between the requirement to achieve the contract saving and maintaining acceptable standards of delivery. It shouldn't be a one or the other.
Yeah, but that was where I was coming from. It was meant to be things like not cutting the verges as often and things like that, rather than not delivering the core elements of the programme. So this relates to the failure of Island Roads to deliver on schedule rather than something that the council is doing wrong.
Yes, absolutely, and it's the risk of failure. It's not.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Would you like me to get any further response on that for you, councillor, or is that?
No, just when you're looking at it, make sure that you're looking at that point.
Yeah.
that there isn't a link. I don't believe that there is, but if you turn it up that there is a link, then please let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Risk 12, Brexit, uncertainty during the transition period followed by the potential legislation, funding and policy changes. So this has remained at red. The Brexit impact group's responsibilities are now a subset of the overall COVID-19 recovery cell. So again, COVID and Brexit are sadly inextricably linked in that way. It remains high overall, and the overall recovery plan has been to Cabinet, so the full details of everything that's been put in place to mitigate those risks has already gone through Cabinet.
Michael has got a question on that.
Okay.
I was just, is it possible to have a copy of the developed action plan regarding Brexit and the specific issues, obviously, for the Isle of Wight? Obviously, by the time the next audit committee, we will know more of what is actually happening with Brexit. Well, we might not, but it seems that it's getting very close to the Brexit date, right, of the end of the year, and we could be really affected as an island regarding this. So that risk could be higher. I mean, can you be higher of this time? It's a particular worrying thing. I'll come back with comments, Reg, regarding I think it's 14 in regards to COVID, but I do see these things as extremely worrying regarding viability of the council and the risks to that viability in this time. I accept it's an unknown and it's a difficult thing to measure, but it is the day is dawning very close, and the next audit committee we will be extremely close to what is happening in Brexit.
You can't get no higher than 12 red.
I know. I'm just saying.
When you come back,
I don't, 12 plus, is it possible? I don't know.
12 red is the highest we do.
Yeah.
Thank you, Debbie.
Okay. Councillor Lilly, I will email you the information I can around that one, if that's helpful.
No, it would just be, I think it's important to know, focus our brains on what is the action plan, so that we can actually ask relevant questions, particularly I think at the next meeting where it will have more relevance, right? Or serious relevance.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Risk 13, achieving the vision for the island. Again, this is increased to red this time. The council's producing a comprehensive recovery plan, which was mentioned earlier. This is the COVID recovery plan that links all of those additional and increased risks as a result of COVID into one programme. The programme, in terms of achieving the vision, underwent a substantive review in light of the financial impact on the council of COVID and its wider impact on other sectors such as housing. And the review was shared with the members' Regen Board in July, which agreed the priorities to be taken forward over the next 18 months. Okay.
Last one.
Last one. Nearly there, chaps. Okay, so the additional demands placed upon the island in terms and partners owing to the pandemic flu or similar large-scale outbreaks. So this is obviously, you know, the most important risk to us at the moment. The current forecast on the budget gap indicates that the estimated gap for 2021 has increased at the point of this report being written to 10.7 million, which consists of additional costs of 8.2 million of unachievable savings, income losses of 8.4 million and losses to council tax and business rates of 3.4 compared to the funding of 10.3 million.
Michael, then Chris.
As you say, this is probably the big one, isn't it? It's you know, the very much the highest and the thing that's in our minds, right? Particularly with the possibility of a second outbreak, which seems to, you know, been heading up and is infecting. The Isle of Wight has gone from low risk to medium risk regarding the pandemic. Is it possible? I suppose the question is for yourself, Chair, and for you, as well, that we should have a kind of watching brief regarding COVID in other committees, and the cabinet are actually having COVID recovery as an agenda item in its own right, and should Audit be doing the same, because what happens in this period is going to, and the economic effects, which also affects our income generation, and obviously the issue of rates and everything interlinks into the council, because the population you know, is going to be really hit by the recession that is predicted because of COVID-19. I'll leave it there really to sort of respond to that. But this is the Tarsumi. This is the big one that could affect us for years and years and years to come.
If this is a question to me personally, I don't think audit should be involved any more than what they are now. We're there to monitor, not to be involved. I think the council officers and
sorry, from a monitoring point of view, shouldn't we?
To deal with it, I think they're doing a good job, and I can't see us picking what they're doing here and there, bits and pieces, would make any difference or be any improvement to it. If it would, they'd have asked Audit to look at it by now. We're looking at the risk. That's all we should be doing, I think. I don't know what the other members feel. I've got Chris and then Adrian to speak.
On that one, my opinion is that we look at the effects of COVID, and we don't need it as a separate item, because all of its effects will come up in all of the other things that we look at. My question related to the the funding for the shortfall and placing on hold schemes in the capital programme totalling some 4.5 million. Capital expenditure and revenue are separate items. Does this reflect stuff that would have moved from revenue into capital, or are we raiding capital to support revenue?
If that's a question for me, I'm afraid I can't answer it. I'm not the accountant. I don't know if there's any accountants on the call that could answer that question at this point in time, but I could take it away for you if that's helpful.
My understanding was you couldn't. Capital's capital, revenue's revenue, and you shouldn't.
Exactly.
You shouldn't do that. So I can't see unless the rules have changed because of COVID, but I don't think you can, Chris.
Chairman, if I may, it's Joseph Forward.
Joe's there, she'll tell you. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Chair. I believe that the reason for the deferral of the capital programme to support the budget shortfall is to do with those items in the capital programme that were going to be funded by borrowing rather than by existing resources. So obviously not undertaking the capital programme will mean that we won't undertake the borrowing, which means we won't have to incur the revenue cost of the borrowing, hence a saving to the revenue budget. And there are also some items in the capital programme that are funded by a contribution from revenue to the capital programme. Obviously not carrying out those items in the capital programme will mean that the revenue contribution isn't required, and hence there's a saving to the revenue budget. I think that's the answer, Chairman.
Thank you very much.
Adrian.
Thanks, Joe.
Yes, just to follow on from that particular point, although in theory capital and revenue are different, there is a grey area in the middle where they overlap, and that's one general point. You know, for example, major repairs can be capitalised or they can go through revenue. And from what Joe has just said, then some items of capital expenditure are financed by contributions from revenue. So I don't know what you make of that. But my question is really to do with the same topic. The first section of this particular, your comment in this particular section lays down where we've lost money and where we've gained money. I think you say at the end compared to funding of 10.3 million. My question is, I don't expect you to know the amounts, but if you could give me any categories of, let's say, requests to central government for compensation for money that we have lost. Are there any of these in the pipeline still, please?
Hello. I am aware that there are, absolutely. I'm not the accountant, so I can't give you that explicit explanation of what they are, how much they are, and when we can expect to see some of that coming back. I just know from other conversations that they are in track. So
we could get back more than that 10.3 million.
I doubt they would ever give us more than no. I can't comment. I'm sorry, I'm not the accountant.
Well, I'm not asking you to give any figures. I'm asking you to say, can we get some more from, I don't know, rate relief, or can we get some more money from reduction in income, that sort of thing. But anyway, so you're saying that we are still asking for money. Oh, Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew.
Sorry, Chairman. It's Andrew Carpenter. I'm aware that there's another scheme for allowing us to claim for any income losses. This is a new scheme the government have announced recently. We're in the middle of submitting a claim, so it's likely that we will be able to claim some of our income losses that we've incurred as a result of COVID-19 back from the government. We're not quite sure yet exactly the amount, but obviously we're working on it. Chris Ward and Kerry Hubbard are working on that at the moment to submit that within the deadline that the government have set. So we are hopeful, very hopeful, that we're going to get some money as a result of that.
Good, thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew.
Right, would someone like to move that we approve the strategic
Can I ask
risk?
another question, Reg?
Another one?
Yes.
Yes, go on.
Thank you, Reg. Sorry, thank you, Chair. It was regarding the, I suppose this 10.3 million. It was to do with the risk of particularly with our statutory services, the statutory responsibility. And obviously COVID is putting a huge strain on families, but if we had more children, for instance, coming into looked after care, right, and we have no control over that you could suddenly have 10 children that could come in tomorrow, right, into our looked after care situation, that would put that figure way out, wouldn't it? We have one child that is actually costing us about over £1 million a year, right?
I think I can sort of, and in terms of answering that, when the accountants actually do the forecasting around any of the potential and predicted outturns, anything that we're currently aware of where that could be an impact is forecasted, you know, to the best of their ability at this point in time. So unless there's any great surprises that come in, the accounts and the way that they're formulated and the forecasts are built in should take in any of that prediction as part of those outturn figures as they're predicted, and that's why often over time they will change as things and intelligence becomes, you know, more clear as time goes on.
Okay, thank you.
Can we move on to someone moving and seconding?
I move.
Thank you for that. Right. I'm now, the clerk will now call your name and you'll either yea or nay, abstain, as you will. Simon?
Councillor Axford,
I agree.
Councillor Hobart,
He's muted, but I think he agrees.
Yeah, I know, I'm coming. Agree.
Councillor Kilpatrick,
Agree.
Councillor Lilly,
Agree.
Councillor Quirk.
Agree.
And I agree. Thank you very much. We're now going to have a 10-minute
Thank you.
break, right?
Just to confirm it's the unanimous vote for.
Thank you. Everyone ready?
Fine by me.
Right, fine. Chris, Michael, where's John and who's the other one? Oh. Ah, there's John. We're all set then.
That's it.
Right. We'll move on to agenda item 8, property investment portfolio biannual report. And we've got Tom Southall here to do it for us. Thank you. Over to you, Tom.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. Thank you for inviting me to present this progress report this morning. I'll very briefly run through some elements of the report for you. Just as context, the report provides an overriding summary with financial analysis up to the 31st of March 2020. As with the previous report, sections 5 and 6 set the context to the financial commentary and analysis that's presented in sections 11, 12 and 13. Now, briefly on this, you will be able to see that capital values have remained steady since March 19, and the annual income, i.e. the rents you have received from these assets, has totaled just under 1.6 million for the year. Section 6.2 details a couple of lease events that are ongoing. I can confirm that 2 of those have been concluded with rent reviews that are backdated for last financial year, so your figures should have an extra £100,000 of income coming on top of that. I think it's important that I draw members' attention to paragraph 4, which briefly sets out and explains the Council's current position with regard to the acquisition strategy itself. So in short, this strategy of investment is now under review in light of the changing government constraints. Section 7 of the report discusses the impact of this and the risk mitigation that can be considered as we move forward. I'd be very happy to take any questions that anyone may have.
Are there any questions for Tom? Adrian.
Hello, Tom. We meaning you and us, have paused any new acquisitions. In your experience, is that true of all local authorities across the country?
Thank you. Yes, it is. There are a great many different aspects of activity that take place from local authorities with property, but generally speaking, investment, i.e. purchasing for return, has completely stopped as a consequence of this this government review.
Thank you.
Michael. It's better like that. You're mute, Michael. You're mute.
All right, still, thank you. I'll repeat what I was saying. I was talking to myself there. In relation to linking what just Adrian sort of said, we've therefore frozen what our investment at this time. So it's basically 39. Is about 39,000 of the 100,000
million.
Yeah, 100 million. Yeah, you're correct. I think it's 35.1 within that. So our investment is the income is from that. Have we done a risk analysis of all sort of each of the properties that we've invested in, and do we know ones that are safer than others or riskier than others? So for instance, we know office space now is, now with people working remotely from home, there's a lot of available office space. Is any of our investment, for instance, offices within that? We know that there are problems with the retail industry with large retailers closing properties. Are we affected by any of those changes due to the market and 19?
Thank you. If I may respond, there is at Appendix 1. There is a detailed list of the assets that you currently hold. Clearly, as you pointed out, only a small amount of the money set aside has been invested, so the portfolio is by no means complete. The assets that have been acquired, however, meet the criteria that I've set out as a reminder in Section 3, and they are considered to be safe assets. That certainly by no means that they are risk-free. A number of them are multi-let, which helps with your diversification of tenant risk. And all of them currently, whilst there are some lease events and there are the possibility of 1 or 2 vacancies in some of the smaller units, they are in good locations and stand a very good chance of continuing to produce income, even through a difficult recession.
Reg, could I make a comment, if I may?
Certainly. Yeah.
In my previous life, I was a salesman and went around various places. So some of these companies I know, all the sites I've been to and done business on, they're all very, very good high-level sites of high-level companies. This is not your industrial estate with Joe the builder around the back. These are very good properties that we're in. And a lot of the companies, if I go through some of them, you've got Metala Toledo. They supply the food industry with check wires. InStyle Fashion Limited is a website for fashion. It's doing well. Self-storage says what it is. Eric's Industrial Services, they supply spare services to all the food industries as well. The only iffy one for me is Go Installations, who do office installations. The other one, the Fastener Company, because I can't pronounce the German name, they supply the car industry. Kate wrote, do what they say. Metabo is they supply power tools. All these companies are good companies, and they're all in good locations. And I can't see any reason why they can't fail, but they're a good choice to sites and companies. That's my comment.
Thank you for that.
Okay, thank you, both of you.
I've got a question, if you like. Who manages the unspent sum of the 100 million? Who actually manages that?
In terms of unspent amounts, then clearly from a financial control perspective, Section 151 officer Chris Ward would need to comment on that process. As I see things currently, the requirement for my team to support in delivering this strategy is, as I say, on hold, pending the outcome of what the government publish, hopefully this autumn.
So it's not the regeneration team have nothing to say in how that unspent millions are invested, or whichever, however it's done. That must bring in a sum of money, surely.
I'm afraid I can't comment on the unspent funds, as that really is a financial consideration and not part of the remit that myself and my team have. I'm sorry, Chairman.
Okay, Adrian.
Surely the answer is that we're not using money that we've got. When we want to buy something, we borrow it. So there isn't a big pot of 65 million sitting somewhere in the back of the office. As and when we need money, we go out and borrow it with at lower rates of interest. But I think probably later on in the meeting, Joe Thistlewood, who's in charge of Treasury management, can probably answer that.
Reg, I can answer that.
Oh,
thank you, Brian. I don't mind who answers it.
No, it's exactly as Adrian said. That's the money we were going to borrow. If we're not going to use it, we don't borrow it, so we haven't got it.
That's fair enough. Right, who else got a question? Michael.
We were in partnership, or the part of this arrangement was obviously with Portsmouth City Council. Do we know what Portsmouth City Council's current view on its policy of investment regarding sort of properties, and does that affect the Isle of Wight Council in any way?
Thank you. I can respond obviously for that. Portsmouth City Council is in a very similar position to the Isle of Wight in the sense that it is not making further investments or further acquisitions for investment purposes, as per the the government consultation and guidelines that I've detailed. I would say, however, Portsmouth is in a completely different place with regard to its property fund than the Isle of Wight. Portsmouth has reached maturity on its fund in the sense that it has invested all of the money that it set aside to do so.
Okay, thank you. I mean, when did they start? When did they start their fund then?
Approximately 5 years ago.
Okay.
Adrian,
Yes, when we invest in properties, there's two things we get. We get the income as we go along, the rent and so on, but we also hope for a capital gain, an increase in the value of the properties as well. I know it's impossible to value anything at the moment, but how often do you think we should value the basic? Because at the moment, I guess we've got them in at cost, haven't we, in our balance sheet?
So the assets are valued as per your legal requirement and your accounts process, which is an annual valuation as at the 31st, at the end of the financial year, 31st of March. They are valued not at cost, they are valued at value, i.e. market value, or existing use value. Effectively and very simplistically, the valuation is a consideration of a yield, a multiplier that an individual would pay against the rent that is being derived by that asset. So effectively, an investor looks at the risks and reward and makes a calculation as to how much they are willing to pay for that income. You can see in table 11.2, there is a summary of the valuations going back to 2018. As I said previously, they have stayed stable. We've seen some growth in one of the assets. Now, as I mentioned, the valuation is a combination of yield, i.e. the market assessment of risk and reward, and the rent that is paid on those assets. Because there are some rent reviews that have just been concluded, I will expect to see a different equation in the valuation that is produced next year. Now, whilst the rent will have gone up, I can't comment at this point as to whether the yield, effectively what the market wants to add as a multiplier, will happen. Clearly, if there's a deep recession, then that can have a negative impact on that multiplier. But if a certain sector is seen to be particularly strong, with particularly strong tenants, then that yield can sharpen and the multiplier can become better, thus increasing your capital value in your assets. The final point, just on that question, I would advise that annual valuation of the assets is perfectly reasonable, and there is no need to do anything further or more frequent at this time.
And this is a question which somebody else may need to answer. If we show an increase in the capital value of the properties that we bought, or if we show a decrease, is that taken across into the accounts of the council?
That is definitely a question for someone other than me, I'm afraid.
Okay. Can we leave that open, Mr. Chairman? Can we leave that question open for somebody else to answer for next time?
certainly, or you can ask it at members' questions if you like.
What, today you mean?
Yeah.
I've just asked it.
Yeah, but you're asking Tom. Joe will be about somewhere, won't you?
I guess she was, yes.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
So we got an answer. It's Andrew.
So I think with all these valuations, we're really talking about unrealised gains. So it's not, it does go through the accounts, but we haven't actually got any additional cash at the point that the property is revalued. So it does have an effect on our balance sheet. It does go through our income and expenditure account, but there's no actual, it all balances itself out. So there's no actual value to the council, cash coming into the council until such time as we would realise those gains. So it's purely a valuation figure at that point. So yes, it will have an effect on the accounts if it goes up or down, but no net impact on the council's cash position.
I understand. Thank you.
Okay. Well, if there's no other questions, shall we note the report and thank Tom for his presentation? Thank you, Tom.
Yes. Thank you, Chairman.
Oh, sorry, Chris got a question. Sorry. You're muted. Mute. Right. Sorry, Chris.
I was just noting the report.
Oh, right. Fair enough. We note the report. Yeah. Thank you, Tom. Right. We'll move on to item 9. The Director of Finance is Section 151 officer. And we got Joe instead.
That's me, yes, thank you, Chair.
Okay. No, we're pleased to see you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not proposing to go through the report in any detail. This is an annual report on the Treasury management activities of the Council for the last 12 months ending 31st of March 2020. At the time of this report, the Council had fulfilled all of its performance or had acted within the bounds of the performance indicators set out in the Treasury management strategy for 2019-20. One thing I will add, Chairman, is in respect of recent developments from the Bank of England Monetary Policy Committee. On the 17th of September, they voted unanimously to keep the bank rate at 0.1% and to maintain its existing asset purchase programme, quantitative easing, at £745 billion. However, the Bank of England did indicate that they are planning to explore how a negative bank interest rate could be implemented effectively if there was a further economic downturn. They've indicated that there will be structured engagement between the Bank of England and the Prudential Regulation Authority on the operational considerations of negative interest rates during the final quarter of this financial year, or this calendar year, sorry. Initially, this would just be notice that the Bank of England were considering this activity and being open and transparent in their communications. Some economists thought that quantitative easing would increase rather than moving to negative interest rates. However, last week, the Debt Management Agency, the central government bank, notified us that all deposits less than 3 weeks duration would attract a negative interest rate through the Debt Management Office. We're working with our Treasury advisors to determine how that impacts us in terms of our investments, but we don't see that there's an issue with it at the moment. I'm very happy to take any questions members may have, bearing in mind I'm not sure what the developments are in terms of negative interest rates.
Thank you, Joe. Are there any questions for Joe? Adrian.
I think I'm right in saying that for the last few years, interest rates for short-term borrowing have been, sorry, I'm talking about where we're borrowing money from other people, not what we're investing, which is what you were just referring to. We've been going short-term because the interest rates are so low, but sooner or later we're worried that interest rates will shoot up and we say, oh dear, I wish we'd invested a bit longer term when interest rates were so low. Do you feel that that time is coming soon?
Thank you, Adrian. No, is a simple answer. I think with the Bank of England looking at negative interest rates, our Treasury Management Advisors' recent forecast suggests that we're going to be at low interest rates for the foreseeable future, probably for the next 2 to 3 years. Obviously, we do keep an eye on the markets and we do keep an eye on what our advisors are saying to us. We have no plans to borrow anything at the moment, but we will take advantage of any good deals as they come through. We're not exposed dramatically at the moment to a big risk of refinancing risk in terms of investment rates going up, interest rates going up, but we're keeping an eye on it very closely.
Okay, thank you.
And no more other questions? Can we note the report? Yep.
Yeah, noted, Reg.
That's it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Joe. Right, item 10, members' question time. We've had no written question, so I think that's the end of this meeting. Thank you all for attending. Thank you, Brian. And I'll close the meeting.